This is the one and only Stevie Nicks, whose songs have had an impact on the lives of millions of people, both via her work with Fleetwood Mac and through her solo career at the same time. I will not be able to be coaxed into singing. Undoubtedly, Stevie, I agree. The famous voice of Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, has never been shy about telling the truth, particularly when it comes to her profoundly convoluted history with Lindsey Buckingham, who was a bandmate of hers and a former lover. Although their creative connection was renowned, the fissures that were present in their relationship behind the scenes continue to captivate audiences even after several decades have passed. Now, in a startling revelation, Nicks has revealed the one thing about Buckingham that she will never tolerate. In doing so, she has pulled back the veil on a dynamic that has been responsible for shaping some of the most successful tunes in the history of rock music. Prior to the spectacular rise of Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had already established a foundation of love and music from the beginning of their relationship. As Buckingham Nicks, they spent the early 1970s pursuing success and creating music that showcased their growing creative synergy. During this time, they were also pursuing success. Behind the scenes, their relationship was burning with the same intensity, but it was already beginning to show symptoms of strain. They had a dramatic shift in their life when they became members of Fleetwood Mac in 1975. In the beginning, it was an opportunity to revitalize the band, but it quickly turned into the impetus for achieving worldwide renown and facing demanding personal obstacles. The relationship between Stevie and Lindsey, which was both artistic and emotional, introduced a new vitality to Fleetwood Mac, which helped to rejuvenate the band. On the other hand, along with that additional energy came a dynamic that would turn out to be just as remarkable as it was remarkable. Both of their creative processes appeared to be doomed to conflict from the very beginning. On the other hand, Stevie flourished in an atmosphere that was less regimented and more spontaneous, whereas Lindsey was a perfectionist who was obsessed with every aspect of their music. Although these disparities initially fostered productivity, they frequently resulted in conflict. In a later interview with National Public Radio in 2017, Stevie stated, "While I needed freedom to let my songs breathe, their contrasting approaches often fueled both their biggest successes and their most heated conflicts." Stevie's statement was made in reference to the fact that he wanted freedom to let his songs breathe. The band's place in the annals of music history was solidified with the publication of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac in the year 1977. In truth, however, the songs that the audience perceived to be timeless classics were actually raw, emotional snapshots of the insanity that existed within the band. Songs such as Dreams and Go Your Own Way were conceived as a result of the emotional turmoil that Stevie and Lindsey experienced. The music allowed the audience to hear the perspectives of two individuals, with Dreams capturing Stevie's optimism for going forward and Go Your Own Way carrying Lindsey's irritation and rage. Fans were able to observe both of these individuals at work. Rumors was the beginning of a long and turbulent period for Stevie and Lindsey, not to mention the fact that it was a successful film. They were already experiencing a breakdown in their personal and professional relationship as a result of the weight of their breakup. But the pressures of celebrity and relentless touring added even more strain to the situation. As time went on, the once loving bond evolved into a source of lingering tension, a dynamic that the entire band, and eventually the fans, couldn't help but notice. The friction that existed between Stevie and Lindsey frequently resulted in the creation of wonderful music. Nevertheless, it also revealed the underlying cracks that existed in their relationship. The fact that they worked together was applauded by millions of people, but it came at a price, one that would determine their legacy just as much as the music that they contributed. As time went on, the tension that existed between Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks became increasingly apparent, and it began to manifest itself in the form of public controversies, which sprang from private disagreements. It was in 2018 when Buckingham was unceremoniously fired from his position with Fleetwood Mac, just prior to the band's global tour. This was one of the most significant breaking moments, in spite of the fact that Fleetwood Mac issued diplomatic remarks at the time. Stevie later disclosed in an interview with Rolling Stone that she had reached her breaking point as a result of an incident that occurred at the MusiCares event. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, he referred to the decision as a coup, stating that Stevie had given the band an ultimatum. She described his demeanor during her speech as dismissive and said that he had termed it a coup. It was either he or she who would leave. A heated argument was sparked among fans as a result of the public nature of their disagreement, with many of them being torn between the 2 points of view. When it came to their professional positions, this was not the first time that their personal tensions took precedence. It appeared that their performances frequently mirrored the tense nature of their relationship. During the band's reunion in 1997 for the dance, the intensity of their unresolved emotions was on full show for all to see. During their live performance of Silver Springs, Stevie sang phrases such as, "You'll never get away from the sound of the woman that loves you," while simultaneously staring directly at Lindsey. This performance was a captivating experience for the crowd. However, for the band, it was yet another reminder of the emotional baggage they still carried, despite the fact that the moment in question became famous. The personal dynamics within Fleetwood Mac were far from peaceful, despite the fact that their success solidified their position in the annals of rock history. The connection that Stevie Nicks had with Lindsey Buckingham was one of profound creative teamwork, but it also resulted in an increasing amount of frustration for Stevie Nicks. It was inevitable that the frustration that had been building up over the course of years of working together would ultimately manifest itself in ways that could not be ignored. Stevie has disclosed incidents that exemplified the tension she faced while working with Buckingham in her candid observations that she has shared over the years. While Buckingham's commitment to precision resulted in some of Fleetwood Mac's most polished material, it frequently left Stevie feeling constricted and dominated. This was one of the most frequently reported difficulties associated with Buckingham's behavior in the studio. Stevie admitted in a recent interview with The Guardian that there were occasions when he felt as though he wanted to tell me who I should be, not only in terms of my musical career, but also in an overall sense. It wore me out completely. Stevie found it more difficult to deal with this sense of creative and personal confinement, particularly given the fact that their personal relationship had already begun to fall apart. In the late 1990s, Lindsey's return to the band was one of the most prominent breaking points that occurred during the band's history. Reports circulated of arguments that took place behind the scenes during the rehearsals for their reunion tour. Stevie later responded to these allegations by noting in an interview with Rolling Stone that his behavior could be considered overly confrontational. Despite the fact that the particulars of these disagreements were extremely rarely disclosed to the public at the time, Stevie's dissatisfaction became increasingly apparent. Over the course of time, the dynamic between the two became characterized by cycles of conflict that were followed by further ones. It was not a single incident that ultimately led to Stevie's breaking point. Rather, it was the accumulation of years of unresolved grievances and intense professional strain. According to the New York Times from the previous year, she described it as an oppressive sensation of being constantly second-guessed, which was something that she simply couldn't bring herself to tolerate. It is evident that the personal toll of their dynamic left a lasting influence, one that continued to shape their relationships for decades to come, despite the fact that Stevie has acknowledged the enormous artistic successes that they made together. Stevie Nicks now has a sense of acceptance and realism when she thinks of her relationship with Lindsey Buckingham, which, after decades of turmoil, she has finally come to terms with. Not only has she acknowledged the genius of their creative cooperation, but she has also acknowledged that the difficulties that exist between them continue to be a key part of their history. According to Stevie, she confessed in one interview that there had been little signs of reconciliation since Buckingham's departure in 2018. Stevie explained that this has been the case. Instead, it appears that Stevie has discovered a kind of peace by concentrating on their collective musical legacy, which is a body of work that continues to strongly resonate with audiences all around the world, despite the personal problems that lie behind it. There is no denying that the stormy relationship between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had a significant impact on both their music and the legacy of Fleetwood Mac. As a result of their creative tension, which acted as both a source of creativity and a source of division, they produce music that continues to be famous even after several decades have passed. Their songwriting, particularly on songs such as Rumors, which portrayed the raw emotions of heartache, fury, and longing, reflected the push and pull of their union. This was especially true on albums like Rumors. Even now, the influence of their dynamic is universally acknowledged by the majority of people. While that drama often strained the group, it also created a unique, relatable narrative that resonated deeply with fans. Stevie once said in an interview that their relationship, both personal and professional, was always crucial to the band's success. He said this in reference to the fact that their relationship was always the driving force behind the band's success. On the other hand, the consequences of their tangled history are just as abundantly clear. The band's persistent friction has threatened to overshadow the band's music, as Mick Fleetwood has pointed out. He has referred to their relationship as both a blessing and a curse. The failure of both of them to fully reconcile their differences is a reflection of how closely their personal and professional lives got intertwined. As well as how challenging it was to separate the two,